Welcome to Unit 3 of Introductory Horticulture. Today we're going to talk about different parts of the plant and what functions those parts hold. Uh, when we first start to look at a plant, these are the primary food source on planet Earth. And if you are familiar with, say, the food web, the plants are typically at the bottom of the food web. They are to be consumed by herbivores, and if you continue up the chain, then the herbivores are consumed by the carnivores. So plants are vitally important to the survival of the planet. And the reason they're the primary food source is because of their ability to photosynthesize, which is the ability to create their own food. There are no other um, living things that can create their own food. Plants do this and they produce food, they produce oxygen, they help to regulate temperature and a climate throughout the world. Um, Without plants, animals would not be able to live, and you would have a short time frame of all animals being extinct. Many of the reasons why, say, the dinosaurs were left the earth was because the the ice age actually killed off the plants, and then the herbivores were the first to go because there was no food for them, and then the carnivores were shortly thereafter because there was no herbivores left. So that's why you see a loss in the dinosaurs, and that's pretty much how the food web works. So like it said, the plant life can't be overemphasized. There would be no life without plants. All plants are the primary food source, directly or indirectly, for every animal that is in existence. Also, plants are major producers of oxygen, and they also sequester carbon, which keeps the climate cool and allows the planet to not overheat. So they offer many different things. Like I said, they keep us cool. They slow down the wind. They are a great anchor to hold soil in place. They are a habitat. They are nice to look at. They offer nice smells, and they also give us raw materials for building. So this is all the function of plants, and they're vitally important to us. Wherever you're watching this lecture from would not be possible without plants. So the first part of the plant we're going to speak about is the leaves. This is where the food is produced. This is where the photosynthesis happens within the plant. There are varying shapes and sizes of leaves. There are flat, there are needle-like or cylindrical type leaves. And something we're going to do in a lab in the class is learn about different arrangements of leaves on plants. So we're going to talk about whether they're alternate leaves. We're going to talk about whether they're whorled leaves. There's a few different types of leaf pattern. And if you remember from last lecture, we talked about taxonomy. One of the ways to figure out what type of plant you're looking at is by understanding the arrangement of the leaves and the size and style of the leaf. This helps to understand what type of plant you're working with. As you can see, here is the diagram of a leaf. The external structure includes the petiole or the stalk, which would be where it attaches to the rest of the plant. And you have the blade, which is the entire size or surface area of the leaf. And then there are multiple internal structures. You can see the veins, the margin, the midrib, the spines. All these are internal structures that help give the plant rigidity and also keep the plant keep the nutrients and water moving throughout the plant. Um, Really important, the leaf is the part of the plant that allows it to transpire. This is very similar to when we sweat. A plant actually transpires. It moves water through its leaves, or excuse me, through its roots up into its leaves, and the water then leaves out of the bottom of the leaves. And this is basically how a plant or a tree will cool itself. And you know if a plant is transpiring because on a hot day, occasionally you will experience a few drops of water if you're standing underneath a tree, and that is the tree more or less sweating on you and moving water through its system. As I just was speaking about transpiration, this is the evaporation of water through plant leaves. Something we talk about quite a lot is the evapotranspiration, and so this portion is one half or one portion of that equation, and transpiration is one of the ways that water is lost in a landscape. So we need to make sure we understand how hot it is, how much wind there is, because that will tell how much these plants are transpiring. The other half of that equation is the evaporation portion, which is the evaporation from the ground surface or from hardscapes or any other area where water may be evaporating. So please remember this transpiration. It's very important to understand the concept and how this works throughout the landscape. The process of photosynthesis, which occurs inside the leaf, is basically the manufacture of a sugar or a food source for plants, or excuse me, for animals to consume. And the basic formula goes: you take carbon and water and light, or which is sunlight, and if you add all these together, um, you basically get glucose, which is a short chain sugar, and then you also obtain oxygen, which is where uh, you see that plants produce oxygen. It's from this process, this formula is where that oxygen is produced. Basically, this is utilizing the carbon dioxide. This is where you start to sequester carbon, where you start to put it into the system and keep it in the system. The opposite of photosynthesis is respiration. This is going to be where the food that is produced is consumed. This is actually, contrary to popular belief, plants do give off carbon dioxide. When a plant is respiring, it is doing exactly how we are. When we eat and we breathe out, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Well, that's the same thing that a plant is doing during respiration. Typically, this is happening in the times of when it's dark. It does happen during the day, but this is more commonly happening at night. The next part of a plant we're going to talk about is the stems, and this has a function of moving water and minerals from the root to the leaves. Um, this can move both manufactured food from photosynthesis process as well as nutrients from, say, an artificial fertilizer. Um, these these stems are ultimately, say, in a tree, a stem will ultimately turn into trunks or heavy branches if they are left to grow long enough. In smaller plants, they just become another branch on a plant or a shrub. And a small flower, these are going to be the stalk where the flower is ultimately attached to. So the internal structure is, you have two main characteristics. You have xylem and phloem. What you're going to learn about is in a plant, these vascular bundles in a monocot are going to be the way water and minerals travel through the system. When you start getting into dicots or dicotyledons, then you have a more uniform structure, and you start to have uh, the phloem and the xylem are not bundles, and they're not random. They're actually more of a vein system similar to what we have in our bodies. The roots have a pretty important function. Not only are they uh, an anchor, which most of us think of a root being the way said plant will hold itself into the ground, but it also acts as a storage device for nutrients in water. When we start to talk about this, we will have to have roots bring the nutrients and water from the soil and up into the plant so that the plant can utilize the nutrients in the places where it needs it. The nutrients are needed throughout the plant depending on what nutrient and depending on what need the plant has. These nutrients have to be moved through the plant, and the roots are where that all starts. Um, when you are looking at a root in a plant, typically those big, huge, larger stems or larger roots are not where this water movement is taking place. A lot of this water movement is taking place in the real fine root hairs, and this is where the roots will absorb the water, absorb the nutrients, and move it throughout the plant's system. So there's two different types of roots. You have fibrous root systems or you have taproot systems. The fibrous root systems are going to be on smaller plants, typically, smaller shrubs. And as you can see in the comparison of the pictures, the fibrous root system has multiple different stems or arms, branches going out, finding nutrients, finding water, helping to anchor the plant. In the taproot system, this is usually for larger plants, trees, shrubs, um, more dense or just in general heavier plants. You will have a one single long taproot that anchors the plant deep into the ground, and the smaller branches that are near the top are where the root hairs will exist and will start to absorb things. One thing to note, it is important when you are thinking about what type of plant you have, um, having a fibrous root system plant is easier to transplant. So you can dig this one up and you can disturb some of the roots and you can still replant it. When you are trying to uh, transplant or move a large plant with a taproot, if you don't capture almost all of that taproot, you will have death in that plant because that plant can't survive without the taproot. That is a vital structure within the plant. So when we talk about flowers, fruits, and seeds, this is basically the reproductive organs of the plant. What you need is you have a pretty flower, and that is there to attract pollinators. So yes, they're beautiful to us, but they are also very colorful and beautiful to, say, the bees or the birds or whatever animal or thing is pollinating or transferring pollen. And the pollen is the male uh, fertilizing agent of a seed that will be taken to a female seed and fertilize that seed to be viable. Ultimately, these fruits and or seeds are collected, eaten, and spread by animals or by wind or by water. There are many number of things that can move seeds around, but those are going to be the most common that we eat or spread by the wind. So the different parts of a flower are the sepal, the petals, the stamens, and the pistil. The pistil is the male sex organ. The stamen is the female sex organ, and those are the two different um, organs where the pollen and the seed are mated together so that you can um, make a seed. Excuse, I hope I said that right. The pistil is the female and the stamen is the male. If I said that incorrectly, I'm correcting myself now. So pistil, female, stamen, male. There are some flowers that have both male and female parts, and there are some flowers that do not. So a complete flower has both male and female parts, and you'll notice in the picture here, it has both the stamen and a pistil, so it can actually pollinate itself. An incomplete flower, this is going to be the opposite, obviously. It's going to be missing one or the other female or male parts. A common variety of this is a pistachio tree. There are male and female pistachio trees. Typically in an orchard, most of the trees are female trees, and you may have one to two, maybe three male trees that are dispersed throughout the orchard to ensure pollination in a larger orchard. Um, so plant genetics, it's a very important thing, and this gentleman named Gregor Mendel, he was basically considered the founder of genetics, and he started to um, test out different theories he had on genes and how different cells were uh, were made, and how basically how we ended up with the different like characteristics we have, our blue eyes, our say brown hair, or brown eyes. He started to look at some of the parent materials and determined how the children of these different parents got different characteristics. So he came up with a whole bunch of charts and equations, and now we understand how these different theories he came up with will start to pass on traits. Okay, so it's all based on the genes that you carry, and you may have heard of recessive or dominant genes. There are certain genes that will come out certain times when parents are mating, when different parents, and now I'm not talking about human parents necessarily, but plant parents as well. So you have the male flower, you have the female flower. This happens in both plants and animals. So when we start to talk about when a plant is growing, you have the cell structure, and this is the same as a animal cell, except there are a few different things that are different. One namely thing is the cell wall. So there are no cell walls within a plant, excuse me, within an animal cell, but they are found within the plant cells. And basically, what a cell wall does is it gives these cells rigidity. So it helps hold the cells up so that it can stand. So once the plant has enough cell walls, it actually is like a building block for holding these cells together and allowing those cells to create a whole plant. The other important areas of a plant cell is the nucleus, which is where all the genetic material is held. This is where, say, your DNA is held, and it will tell what type of plant, what traits it's going to have. And then the cytoplasm is where all of the functions of the plant take place. So where the cell stores its nutrients and consumes its nutrients and generates energy and basically where most of the functions have. These are where the organs of the cell would be found. And then simple cell division is called mitosis. This is when you take one cell and it will duplicate itself and make more than one cell, and that's how all cells are divided. Basically, in these mitosis, the chromosome pairs duplicate themselves and form a new cell. And then each cell is identical to the old cell. When we look at reproduction and we take a male cell and a female cell and put them together, We now have something called meiosis, which is reproductive cell division. This is when you end up with a different cell at the end than in the beginning. So these cells will turn from two into one, and you'll end up with different than the old. So the new cell will be different than the old. Genetically engineered plants. This is something that has been going on for many, many years. Basically, when you take a plant and you hybridize it, or you find a specific trait from a certain plant and you would like to perpetuate that or breed that into the plant, you are now genetically modifying that plant to accept the different styles or different traits that you're going after. Uh, Really common um, uh, genetically engineering of this that happened over many, many years is corn. Corn was basically not really an edible product when we first started growing it. We started to find corn that was more edible, it had more kernels, and we started breeding the corns that had the most kernels together until we have the corn that we have today. So um, these also can be utilized with adding in certain genes from other plants or even other animals to encourage plants to not be susceptible to a specific disease. They are not going to be hurt when you spray a plant with certain pesticides. Now, I'm really not going to get into the argument of are GMOs bad. In my opinion, I don't believe that they're bad. I believe GMOs allow us to perpetuate a race, a human race of people that allows us to uh, feed those who do not have or where things can't grow. You would not have food in certain parts of the world if you did not have a genetically modified plant because it would not physically grow there. Um, it is a lot of controversy. There are a lot of things out there, and like I said, you take your opinion and I'll take mine. And I eat GMOs and I don't see any problem with them. So, in summary, we talked about plants being the primary food source of food and oxygen. They do this through a process called photosynthesis. The plant's leaves capture sun's energies. They use carbon dioxide and they produce a simple sugar or a food source. And plants are something that is constantly in motion. They're always finding nutrients. They're always growing. They're always uptaking water. They're uptaking nutrients. They're trying to increase the ability of them to photosynthesize. This is what we know of in plants. And so with this lecture, thank you, and I will see you next time.